What do you think? Today we're going to be talking about choice-based handling. Hiya, I'm Abby, by the way. I am the curly-haired keeper, and let's talk about choice-based handling. A quick disclaimer, by the way, I am not an animal behavior expert. This is solely based on my own personal interactions with my animals at home. So what is choice-based handling? Choice-based handling is exactly what it sounds like. You are giving the animal the choice whether they want to interact with you or not, and to what extent they want to interact with you. So I am sitting on the floor today because I want to show you how I work with Aries and kind of the typical way in which I interact with him and get him out of his enclosure. And he's my most choice-based animal that I work with in my snake room. He's not 100% choice-based. Actually, none of my animals are, and I will talk about that in a moment. But I want to talk a little bit about what choice-based handling is and how I work with my animals to get them to the point of making those kind of choices for themselves, whether they want to be handled or not, and developing the confidence to make that choice independently. So behind me, you see Aries. He is hanging out by his open door. I have this enclosure door wide open, and he is deciding right now whether he wants to come hang out with me or not. Generally, he's pretty social. He will come out on his own. If not right away, then eventually he almost always will come out, hang out, usually for longer than I generally have time or energy for, but he'll hang out for a very long time, and then I'll put him back in and he'll want to come right back out again because he's Aries. But that's essentially what it is. If he doesn't want to come out, he doesn't come out. He stays in, and we either hang out by the door for a little bit and I give him chin rubs, or he just doesn't want anything to do with me and he turns around and goes to sleep. So in order to get an animal to this point of feeling confident enough to come on out of their enclosure when their door is open, it takes some time and effort to work with them and show them that they are safe and secure when you open the door. Now, Aries is a super dwarf retic, and retics in general are a little bit more interactive than some other species. I have boa constrictors at home as well, and my retics definitely come out of their enclosures faster and more often than my boas do. My boas still will choose to come out and interact at intervals, but not quite as often as my retics. So that's just something to keep in mind. Some species are just a little bit more naturally, I think, social than others. So step one that I do when I get a new animal home and I want to encourage them to feel safe and secure, I essentially leave them alone in their house and just kind of hang out in the same room with them. So I spend a lot of time in my snake room. I'm in here cleaning a lot, working a lot, and just kind of like, I don't know, I talk to them when I'm by their enclosure door. I change their waters a lot, and I'm just kind of putzing around in here all the time. So they're very used to my presence, and I think they get very used to my presence even as a new animal when I bring them home. And yes, I do quarantine my animals. We actually quarantine our animals upstairs on the main living space, so our quarantine animals probably actually even get a little bit more interaction with just us being in the same room as them than even the snakes that are downstairs. But quarantine is important. Don't forget to quarantine. So the snake feels safe and secure. They're used to my presence. The next thing that I'll do is actually just open their enclosure door and just see how they react. If they react with a food response, I'll turn that food response off. If it's one of my retics that food respond, I usually go in and get them out so they know immediately, like, hey, I'm not food. And that just kind of helps train them to know when it's food time and when it's not. But if they don't do food reaction, I usually just open up their enclosure and just hang out with their enclosure door open. And that gets them acclimated to, hey, my enclosure door is open. Nothing is really happening. It's still a safe space. I'm good, nothing's happening. So they get very comfortable with that in that space. The next thing I do is I look for behaviors from them. So if I see an animal hanging out by their glass, I will go up and open up the glass and again, just kind of hang out. Sometimes they will retreat right away and I just let them. I don't go in and fetch them out. As tempting as I know that is, usually I just let them retreat when I'm working on choice-based handling. At some point in the process, all of my stakes have gotten to a point where when I open that glass when they're already hanging out at the front, they know that nothing's gonna happen, so they stick around and then they'll start doing what Aries is doing here. They'll start exploring outside of the door a little bit. Sometimes they don't come out right away, but they'll start exploring outside of the door and just checking out to see what's going on. And because that they are used to my presence and used to my smell and know that that presence and that scent doesn't pose a threat, they feel much more secure and safe already. So they are going to be in a much calmer state of mind to activate that kind of curious mindset instead of that, something's happening, fight or flight response. So I can get him out if I want to. I can go in and get any of my animals out, and I do that pretty regularly. Not all of my animals are 100, actually none of my animals are 100% choice-based, because I want to make sure that all of my animals are comfortable and don't get overly stressed if I need to pull them out to give them health checks, take them to the vet. I do a lot of community outreach programs at this point, so if I need to pull out animals to travel with them somewhere, I don't want them already stressed out because I had to go into their enclosure to get them. So I do work with my animals both ways, both choice-based and going into their enclosure and getting them. I think it's just like anything else. The more time you spend invested in working with an animal, the more you'll get out of it, and so will they. So again, I am very privileged in that I can spend a lot of time with my animals in this space, and I think that's a big reason why my animals behave the way they do, is because they're just very used to humans being in their space. So they just do a really good job with human interaction. Hi, buddy. He's literally just gonna stay there. Can you see him? Look at that noodle. You just straight up lounge. Look at you. And that's kind of the final step, right? Because everything's just going to build off of itself from there. If they're comfortable enough to come partially out of the enclosure door, they're just gonna get more and more comfortable, and at some point come completely out and be like, oh, cool, this is fine, this is fun. I get to come out and explore and get further enrichment outside of my enclosure. And they will recognize you as a safe space, nothing bad is gonna happen. Actually, something fun is gonna happen, and yeah, they kind of associate, at least that's been my experience, they associate your scent and your presence as something positive is going to happen. So I've noticed with Aries anyway, when I come downstairs, sometimes he'll be asleep when I come downstairs, and when he notices me down here, he'll wake up and come straight to his door. I'll open it up, he comes right out, and it's like tick playtime, I guess. That's the only way I can describe it. And he literally does a little patrol lap. I let him kind of partially free roam. I'm still supervising him around the snake room. And yeah, that's kind of the gist of it. It's not, I don't do it in the target training sense. I know some keepers do the target training route, which I think is amazing. I think there's so much value in target training, and I would love to get to that point with my animals. I just haven't invested the time to do that yet. I would like to. Just life is life. So I haven't gotten to that point yet, but I know there's lots of really amazing keepers that do that and highly recommend it. So yeah, definitely check that out if you like the idea of choice-based handling and kind of this approach that I've shared with how I do it doesn't really make sense or doesn't work for you. I would definitely recommend going to check out like target training ideas, tips, tricks, all of that stuff. Anyway, I hope that was helpful. I hope that kind of helped clarify what choice-based handling is and at least one path you can take to get there. Obviously, this is just one way to do it. There are several different ways to get there. Take what you like from it or nothing at all. As always, don't forget to support USARK and USARK Florida. They fight for our rights and privileges to keep these amazing animals. And I think things like this, like choice-based handling, target training, all of that is a really big testament to how amazing these animals are and kind of how wrong we have been as humans in assuming that they don't possess the wherewithal to learn these kinds of things or make choices for themselves. So yeah, I think it's just a really interesting approach to keeping and interacting with these animals. So yeah, make sure you support USARK, USARK Florida, and as always, huge thank you as well to my Patreon members. Your support means so much. I'm saving up to upgrade Stella, my big 12-foot girl, into a much bigger enclosure because I think she's gonna be much happier that way. So your membership is going to go towards that. If you would like to check out any of the links that I mentioned, all of that is in the description below. So until next week, I will catch you all later. Bye. I want to talk about choice-based. By independently, I just mean like they make the choice whether they want to come out or not. Not like they're opening the enclosures by themselves. He likes to do this where he just hangs out on the door tracks. So he knows they can't close the doors because their enclosures are locked. I mean, they will if I don't lock their enclosures. Look at him. Sir, what are you doing? Because snakes lock your enclosures. But anyway.